morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show. 105.9 The Zone ESPN, brought to you by the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook and Lounge and award-winning Dancing Rabbit Golf Club. Great place to watch college basketball. We've got March Madness coming up, Augusta National, and the NFL Draft. So full slate of sports and fun at the Sportsbook and Dancing Rabbit Golf Club. We welcome in, ESPN Sports Center legend, and I met him several years ago. He's not going to remember this, but Kenny Mayne, longtime ESPN Sports Center, among many other things, joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Kenny, about 6 or 7 years ago, I met you at the Lux Hotel in downtown L.A. across from ESPN and the Grammy Museum. You were eating breakfast.
I remember staying at that hotel. I don't remember our meeting. But tell me something. What was significant about it? Did we just talk? Was something passed along that was important?
No. I was kind of freaked out, and I debated for a while, because I was with some friends and colleagues out there. I was doing some shows the week of the Grammys, going into the Grammys, and from the Grammy Museum. And I saw you. And so, I thought, all right, at some point I'm going to go over there and just say, hey, I watched you growing up, so on and so forth. Because here's what I was thinking. How many times have you heard this? I was in college in the mid-'90s, and I can't tell you how many nights we watched, me and, my buddies, watched you and your crew on SportsCenter while drinking beer, or the next morning when they ran it again while we were hungover. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, right?
A couple of times. I remember a stranger one, I think it was in Minnesota. An older woman came up and asked me if I was who I am, and I said, yeah. And then she said I wasn't, and how dare I pretend to be that she always liked to do. I was like, no, I am me. You just asked. And I said, so I didn't have my ID. I ended up telling her to Google me, or I don't remember what happened. But no, I appreciate that you stopped me. Like Keith Olbermann always says, he was telling a story once, because, I've been gone from ESPN now for a couple of years. When somebody brings up something nice like you just did, about the old days or in college watching or whatever, it's just like, thanks for remembering. Because he was sitting next to, I always forget her name. She played Bewitched on TV. I'll get her name before the interview is over. And on an airplane, and people kept coming up and autographs and pictures, and he was like, do you ever get tired of that? And she's like, no, like, it's kind of cool that somebody still remembers or how I impacted them even for a short little time in their life.
Oh, man, look, we thought y'all were like gods. I mean, we're in college. We're having fun. We're in the SEC. I went to Mississippi State. And, you've heard it before. You and Patrick and all the dudes doing SportsCenter, and that's what we did. We watched SportsCenter religiously at night and in the morning when you got back from class, if you went. And so that's, yeah. All right, cool. Kenny Mayne on the Out of Bounds Show. All right, here's something else.
Elizabeth Montgomery. I just got it.
Elizabeth Montgomery.
Yeah.
There we go. I was reading, even more stuff on you leading up to this interview, and I didn't realize you went to UNLV. And years ago, I read the book Runnin' Rebel by Dan Wetzel, and we had Wetzel on several times because I went to the 87 Final Four as a kid, Kenny, in New Orleans, and UNLV was there, and I became a UNLV fan because of Tart the Shark and Biting the Towel, and of course there was so much fun to watch Greg Anthony and Augman and the whole crew. And so I was thinking, I was like, dang, Kenny Mayne played football at UNLV. And then later on, I would get into sports talk radio, and Wetzel hooked me up with Tart the Shark. And I got to interview him and talk to him off the air several times before he passed away. And so for me, it was like one of the coolest moments for me as far as career-wise. What was it like to be at UNLV? He got there in the 70s. It looks like you were there in the early 80s. What was it like to be at UNLV during that time, Kenny?
Yeah, well, I think during my time there, they were good, but they weren't great. They were kind of NIT level, right? And then they had really good years before I got there and really, really good years after I left there that you're describing. And then, of course, they won the title with that crew, Grandma Mon, the whole gang. And, I mean, I knew Tark. I knew his daughter. Like I was in school at the same time with her. And it was cool. I mean, he had this reputation already. There was the excitement about it. You're describing like their heyday. They're kind of like their revival heyday, right? Because they'd been to the Final Four with Reggie Theus back in, '76. But it was exciting. And I remember, he got criticism. Turned out his class, the one that won the title, I think all of them graduated. A few of them graduated early. And he always said, if I were at Johns Hopkins, I've had all doctors, right? If I were at Harvard, I'd have all lawyers. I'm here at UNLV. They're doing what they do. And the school is much stronger even then, but way stronger now than people give it credit for. They think it's just a bunch of people screwing around in the Las Vegas Strip. They have great programs in hotel management, the sciences, the whole 3D element. I was in their broadcasting class, which has grown a great deal. I was just there and speaking to them during Super Bowl week. So I think the place kind of had an old reputation that was never really fully true, and it's certainly not so now.
The first time I went to Vegas in 2003, we're visiting with Kenny Mayne on the Out of Bounds show. First time I go, my buddy got us a driver, and so the first thing I made the guy do was take me to the T-Mac Center, and I just had to see it because I was UNLV and the Running Rebels and Tark the Shark, and so that was pretty cool. And you're right, man. I was there for the NFL draft, I guess, almost 2 years ago. And your alma mater and campus and everything else has really grown and exploded. All right, let's speaking of during that time, and I remember Reggie Theus. I think he went to the Chicago Bulls and played for a while because as a kid I got WGN and I got all the Bulls game even prior to Jordan joining the Bulls in like 84, 85. But who was your favorite, or who is your favorite UNLV player of all time?
Randall Cunningham, but that's football.
Oh.
Randall was a freshman my senior year. I was.
Are you serious?
In fact, I just played golf out there with Sam King. He was the kid who played ahead of me. He led the nation in passing yards. And then Randall was a freshman coming in our last year. And then, strange as it is, this last week, I ended up in a golf tournament where Jim McMahon and I stood on I think it was hole number 4 at this it was like an NFL Legends Veterans event. And me and Jim McMahon hit par 3 shots for all the teams. Jim was at BYU our senior year, Sam and I. He was injured. Steve Young was a freshman. He came in and played. But that was one of UNLV's best football wins ever. We beat at BYU my senior year. I mainly charted plays, but Sam had like the game of his life, and we beat him 45-41. Like that game is so vivid. I can still see the last winning play, Jimmy Sandusky, little post corner. Like it gets written up, even though UNLV had a really good season this year in football under Coach Odom. But that game alone.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't realize that UNLV knocked down a huge win over Lavelle Edwards and BYU when they were rolling. And I didn't realize that Randall Cunningham was on the team when you were there. Did you see it then that this guy had, that he could be, maybe not Philadelphia Eagles starting quarterback for a long time, but that he was really, really talented, Kenny?
Yeah, I mean, just natural talent and confidence. And, he probably could have played as a freshman one way or the other, but, we kind of had what we had going already. Sometimes we would just run up and just launch the ball, just screwing around to see how far he could throw it. And I could throw pretty far back then, but Randall's ball was still rising when mine was, starting to descend. So good guy. I stay in touch with him here and there. He's now a pastor in Las Vegas. He also has been coaching his kids in the high jump. And he just signed on to be an assistant track coach at UNLV.
Oh, now that's cool. That is cool. All right, so Kenny Mayne and Randall Cunningham were roommates at UNLV.
Not quite roommates, but we knew each other.
I mean, teammates. That's what I meant. Teammates at UNLV. Very cool. All right, you've done some work for Caesars. You were out in Las Vegas last week. What all did you do?
Honestly, everybody was asking if I was there for the Super Bowl, and I kind of was, but I, didn't go to the game physically. I wasn't going to spend that much money on teams were cities I'm not from. If it had been Seattle, I might have considered it. But I did a whole bunch of different events. Like I said, I spoke at the school. I did an event for disabled folks up at a casino. It was like this channel called the Ability Channel, and I did my own foundation work. It's called Run Freely. So I wrecked my ankle playing football, in 1980, and all these years later, my ankle, is pretty much self-fused, doesn't work very well. So I ended up finding this device up in Gig Harbor, Washington, and once I got mine, Gretchen, my wife, and I started this foundation called Run Freely, and we've been helping veterans get into these to get out of pain. So you put it on, it doesn't change anything about your situation, but it lets you do things you can't do otherwise. It sort of displaces the pressure off the joint, right? So we did a fairly cool and short event. I talked Joe Montana into showing up at Bobby Flay's restaurant at Caesars, and 7 people who paid the right amount of money got to catch a pass from Joe, keep the ball, shake his hand, get a picture, and we were able to call a new veteran the very next day and explain to him, guess what, you're next in line. Because we're not like a big, there's no building, there's no big organization. It's just kind of raising one brace at a time, right? So this one was a unique way to do it. We did the same thing with Mike Penix up in Seattle at Husky Stadium back last April, and I'm kind of trying to roll this out. What if we could do this, 5 times a year, get the next quarterback up, find people who admire that person, whether it's a current player or, former great. How many people would want to run and catch a pass from Patrick Mahomes right now? Probably a bunch. So if we can get it off the ground and just do one project at a time, then it'll be beneficial for the next veterans in line.
Kenny Mayne on the show. Run Freely is the charitable organization to help give injured veterans leg braces to make life easier. And he joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. That's a cool story. How did you, I know you've met some of the coolest, most famous people in the world, but how are you able to get Joe Montana to Caesars and Bobby Flay's restaurant Super Bowl week?
I don't quite know how I did that, but we just asked. You can't, what's the expression? You can't even lose if you don't enter. That was an old Nick Nito quote. By the way, the guy that makes these devices would be insulted if we called them braces. I call it a brace by accident. Because, you can buy a brace at Costco. This is a device specially made. It only works for you. They have to mold it to you, and then you test it. And
custom
there's
fitted.
like a process to get through it. No, I've met Joe. I've done a couple stories with him through the years. Like, it's not like we stay in contact a lot. I've done a charity event that he was involved in with Marshawn Lynch. I was the host of that. So I think he was just being a good guy. I got to the right person, told him the same story I just told you. I sent him the link, and they called back like 2 days later, said Joe wants to do it. They just got to figure out when he can do it. So I got in touch with his girl. She cleared out the schedule. She said, here's the window. I know Bobby Flay, actually from horse racing originally, because I was at Saratoga. He's a big horse racing guy, owns horses. And they asked me, would I come out and do this little shoot with this guy named Bobby Flay, who at the time I didn't know who he was. Maybe I'd heard the name, but he wasn't what he is now then, right? Like he was just kind of on the rise. And he was doing this little, what they call it, throwdown. I think it was called throwdown. And it was very ad hoc. It was just like, all right, throw up a camera. We're at a racetrack. We got Bobby here, and we got the local chicken maker guy here. And it was Hattie's Chicken of Saratoga, if anybody knows. And I was the judge, right? So obviously he's blown up since then. He's got all these restaurants and all these TV things and has done well. But I just asked. I texted him and said, hey, I have Joe Montana to throw footballs. I don't have a place to do it. We're going to be on the strip. We're going to be in the parking lot. I didn't have an official place because we didn't have an event. It was just, if Joe says yes, we'll figure out where to do it. And he wouldn't have cared if we did it at a parking lot. It was just going to be, hey, here's Joe, here's my speech, throw balls, everybody go home. And it worked.
That is awesome. Kenny Mayne joining us on the Out of Bounds show. Okay, so I want to go to Seattle and the Seattle Seahawks. I'm wondering if Largent is going to be the guy here, but who Who is your favorite Seattle Seahawk player of all time, Kenny?
He's right up there. I mean, you probably don't know this part, but after I left UNLV, I told you I was just second string, got in here and there. But the kid who played ahead of me got offered to go to the Seahawks, and he turned it down. He was going to go to Canada. And my coach called and said, hey, if you like him, Sam, you'll like me. Like give the other guy a look. And so I ended up going up to Seattle, got to throw for their quarterback coach, Jerry Rome. And when you do those tryouts, oftentimes it's just whoever's in the building, hey, we need somebody to run some routes. And out comes Steve Largent. He was the guy that I got to throw to in order to, win the contract, right? Wow. And so I threw, I was nervous. I'm throwing to Steve Largent, but he caught everything and it didn't look horrible. And I was in great shape at the time, even though I had the messed up ankle, and ended up signing. But I worked out all summer at Kirkland, the rest of that summer. But when they started their real camp, which was at the time over near Spokane, a place called Cheney, day one, I failed the physical. They put me on this test.
Oh, no.
And I didn't know it was a test for my ankle. I thought it was just another test, like running a 40 or benching or whatever, right? So I'm in there working, like trying to prove myself. I would have cheated. I would have gone easy on my good leg and hard on my bad leg, and they would have looked similar, but instead there was too big a variance, and I was marginal at best anyway, right? Like I didn't have a big resume from college. I could throw, but they weren't going to take the risk on somebody like that. So I think it's got to be Steve Largent, right? He helped me out in that way, and just his manner, and there's so many great ones that have come through all the years. Marshawn would be another one.
Oh yeah,
but they've had some great years, and also I was still kind of curious about how it all went down. Nothing against the new guy. It sounds like they're off to a running start, and I trust Schneider, their GM. I always said whenever they made any moves, when people would question it, hey, I trust Pete and I trust Schneider. They seem to know what they're doing. They make the playoffs almost every year. They don't always go all the way to the top, and then who does, right? Only two teams get all the way, and only one team wins the whole thing. Right. So if they think this was the move, I guess. But I kind of wish Pete had the chance to, say I'm done when I want to be done, as opposed to it kind of seems that they guided him out, right?
Yeah. John Snyder and Pete Carroll, good grief. I mean, what a team. And like you said,
there's a bunch of franchises. You look around the league, there's certain ones that are pretty damn consistent always, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a short list. Then there's a whole bunch of teams. You don't know what you're getting. You might get a 4-win season. You might get a 12-win season. You just don't know. So Seattle, for the whole existence since, how long was it? It was 12 years, whatever it was. He damn near was in the playoffs every time, but I think he missed twice, if I'm not mistaken, and took them really deep twice. Should have won back-to-back. I still say the play was not to give the ball to Marshawn. They should have faked it to Marshawn, because that's what was expected. Then you roll Russell left, either throws it, runs it in, or throws it away.
Yeah.
Still had a timeout. But, yeah, I was at that game.
Oh, no, Kenny. God.
I remember just kind of staring at it like you're looking at a strange animal and you don't know what it is. Like, why I tilted my head. I asked my wife, did that just happen? Like, it all just was surreal. But, oh, well, they were close.
Kenny Mayne on the show. I want to ask you about 2, maybe 3 Mississippi guys, Seahawks. KJ Wright was as you know, long time, really productive linebacker for y'all during the heyday that you just described. He's a super guy too. And he went to Mississippi State, and then DK Metcalf is from the state of Mississippi too. And he went to Ole Miss, and he's having a magnificent career too. And then Charles Cross, when I was at the draft in Vegas a couple of years ago, he was your first round pick, which was so cool for us, Kenny, because later that evening I got to have drinks with Mike Leach, and he was so excited about Charles and getting drafted and having the junior year that he had. But anyway, there's some Mississippi flavor up there, and I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on those guys.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and also Coach had to be so proud, as you all were, when you get somebody that comes out of your neighborhood and goes on to something like that. KJ, I believe, is running the show for this little event I'm involved in this week, is the Seattle Sports Awards Show. They used to do it every year And like back when I was a kid, even before that, you'd always read about it. It was like this big deal, the gathering of the best, whichever team had the best year and the other athletes. And then they discontinued it for some reason. Well, I know why, because the newspaper that put it together became just like an online paper, right? They stopped, being what they once were, and it just kind of died. But it was brought back to life about 10, 12 years ago. I was asked to be a part of it and have been involved ever since. And I think KJ is going to be the host of it. So that'll be fun to see him this week and see what he has to offer. But DK's, it's self-evident how big and strong he is and the plays he makes. I think he's just going to keep on getting better, like keep learning how to do it better, right? Like they obviously had the physical skills from the start. I remember him saying he was crediting Bobo, the new kid, with all these little techniques that he hadn't quite seen. There's some things, and so it kind of shows, somebody being open to learning more, even after being in and seemingly one of the best ones in the position, admitting like, no, I got a lot more to learn. So I like that, and he once in a while gets an extra penalty or two, doesn't need, but I like his passion at the same time.
Yeah, two phenomenal play. I agree with you on DK. I mean, there's still more runway there, as far as maybe a couple of more levels of getting better. So
I always said that about Randall Cunningham when he ended up having a great NFL career, didn't win a Super Bowl. A bunch of guys had great careers. Marino, Warren Moon, all sorts of people didn't win a Super Bowl, right? It doesn't say that their career was now garbage. It just means they didn't win a Super Bowl for circumstances in some cases, right? But I wish Randall had I don't know who his coordinator was during the Philly years, but the story goes that they just kind of like, it was all defense. Randall's talented, just do whatever you want, have fun with it. They had a play called RC Special, and it just was hike the ball to Randall and see what happens. Just have him run around, maybe throw. It was kind of like the original run pass option, but I don't know. I just feel like he could have been groomed in a different way. Like if he had a Billick, right away. Like look what they did in Minnesota, right? I mean, that was phenomenal that year. It was just like the offense was bizarre. I mean, for one, it doesn't hurt to have Randy Moss, but a lot of it is that circumstance and timing and who you pair with. Is your defense good? You get the ball in good position. There's 100 things that go into it. And I think we all kind of overanalyze it too much and criticize too much. Like this whole thing about Purdy's ridiculous. Like he's had a really good 2 years. I don't know why we're knocking him at all. Like I don't know why we every day have to discuss who's the best ever and where does people, they're all pretty damn good.
Right.
And in certain situations, some, stand out for the circumstantial reasons. In other situations, they stand out because they're one of a kind, right? There's only so many Joe Montanas and Tom Brady's and Patrick Mahomeses, right? There's a handful of the greats. All the rest are really good. Like, I don't know that you can really distinguish.
Yeah, I fight it here because, I'm biased because Dak Prescott's at the Cowboys. I was not a Cowboys fan growing up, but as soon as he went to the Cowboys, I became a Cowboys fan because I love Dak. And, he gets hammered on anything he does. And I'm like, they don't even have a GM in place in a league that's everything's decided by a whisker. And I think they've been pretty damn good considering kind of the way that thing is run and a bunch of playoff appearances, but it's all about, he's going to get hammered as soon as he throws a couple of picks. So I'm right there with you.
That's the hardest. I don't know if there's a harder job. Certainly not in sports. There's no other. I don't know if there's a harder job in sports, and maybe any job. There's so much pressure. The speed of the game is insane. The decision you have to make that quickly. And then the mental part of it, living with the criticism within, right? Your coaches, if they're that way, your teammates, you got the prima donna wide receiver yelling at you, I was open. And the media, if you listen to it, so there's a lot there.
I could do this for another hour, but I know you've got other things going on, and I want to ask you one more question. And I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but I got to go back to, again, mid-90s. I'm in college. We're watching y'all religiously. It was a cool part of my life. And, then I end up in sports marketing and sports media, which has been an absolute blast. And I'm very fortunate. So, and then I bartended in college once I, became 21. And so we really watched y'all, at night as we were finishing up the bar shift. Do you, now that you've been, you were at ESPN, I think from 94 to 21, and you've done it all, and you've interviewed people, and you've had an amazing career. Now that you've been able to step away a little bit, do you realize how cool it is? And do you talk to some of the guys, men and women that you worked with at ESPN, and you're like, damn, that was a magical kind of gold standard run for sports media and broadcasting, Kenny?
Yeah, no, it's not like saying it with any big ego, but it really was a unique time. And we were lucky enough to be the ones that happened to have the jobs at that time, right? There's other really good people that came after, and they didn't get to be a part of it just because they were born 5 years too late or whatever, right? But yeah, and the thing is, the importance of it is probably what was crucial, because at the time there was no internet. It was experimental at best. In fact, I still distinctly remember a night we were walking by on the way down the hall to do a show, I think, and these three guys, there were three computer terminals in the entire building of ESPN that let you get to what was called the internet, the World Wide Web, right? We didn't know what it was. And I remember laughing, like, hey, good luck with that, guys, like making fun of them. That's stupid, whatever you guys are doing, because we have newspapers over here. They used to print all the newspapers from around the country, and they'd copy them off, and that was your packet, right? You had your packet to look back at some stories to set yourself up for whatever the game was. But the key thing was, most people around the country didn't know the result of the thing you were about to tell them, right? Very few people knew who won the game between, the Knicks and the Pacers, or whatever it was, right? If you lived in those cities, of course, or if you listened to a radio show and they somehow gave the scores. But most people, as far as pictures go, there's no way you could know, right? And so we were bringing on this brand new thing that, had never been told. In fact, you didn't know the result. And we always had this method of, you try not to give away do it like it's a mystery, right? Here's the lead in, the setup, right? This is what was happening before the game. Now you show the game, now you got the result. And so just that alone kind of made it more special. But then you consider all the cast of characters too, Stuart Scott, doing shows with him, and Dan and Keith, leaving out Kilborn, all these other characters, that were involved. It was a pretty fun little, whatever period you want to call it, 10 years or 8 years or whatever that heyday was.
Kenny Mayne on the Out of Bounds show, and he joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This was a super cool experience for me. I appreciate you giving us 30 minutes today. You've done it all, but best of luck in whatever endeavor and different things that you're doing, including obviously Run Freely, which helps give injured veterans custom fit devices to make life easier. Kenny Mayne on the Out of Bounds show. Thanks again. We appreciate it, Kenny.
All right. Thanks for having me.
That was cool. Kenny Mayne, longtime ESPN sports broadcaster, among many other things, very talented, and was kind enough to stop by today. Brought to you by the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook and Lounge, an award-winning Dancing Rabbit Golf Club. Great place to watch the games, play golf, entertain clients, guys trip, buddies trip, all at Dancing Rabbit Golf Club and the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook and Lounge.